But I would venture to say that in tournaments like the World Series of Poker Main Event, people really don't want to go broke. So if they really don't want to go broke, and I'm trying to value bet here, I think the exploitative play is to probably make us a bet that does not put our opponent all in by the river. Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little for PokerNews.com, and today we have an interesting hand from the $10,000 buy-in World Series of Poker Main Event. Under the gun raises, this is a tight player, so probably has a pretty good hand. Folds around to us with pocket threes and the big blind, and this is a situation where, really, calling is the only viable option whatsoever. You don't want to fold because you're probably behind. One time someone told me, we're probably behind with our three, so we should fold. But no. You want to call. The purpose of calling is to try to flop a three of a kind, right? You're trying to flop a set. So we are going to call, try to flop a set, and then stack our opponent, who probably does have a pretty good hand. If we don't get our set, we're probably going to end up check folding on most flops, and that is okay. We're putting in 400 chips, almost nothing, to try to win a whole pile. So this is a great spot to call. You also don't want to re-raise because you don't want to re-raise against someone who's raising under the gun who should have a strong range. All right, so flop comes. Queen 3-2. We have the mythical set of threes, three threes. So take a second, ask yourself, should we check or should we bet? Well, in general, if you've studied at my training site, pokercoaching.com, you will know that you want to be checking on this board essentially every time. And that's because the big blind doesn't really have a whole lot of good hands here, and the under the gun player does. They have aces, kings, queens, ace, queen, right? These are all hands that are very strong, that are happy to put money in. Whereas I may re-raise before the flop with aces, kings, queens, and ace, queen. Maybe not ace, queen, but definitely aces, kings, and queens. So this is a scenario where our opponent should be a big favorite. Obviously, they're not this exact time, but in general, this is a spot where I'm going to check every time. They're going to bet, and now we have a decision. So pause the video, take a second, and think about what you would do in this situation. Actually, type it in the comments. Commit to the answer. Doing this will go a long way to helping you become a better poker player because you are actively thinking about what to do in these scenarios. So seriously, pause the video and do it right now. Okay, you did it. Good. This is a situation where even though the board is kind of uncoordinated, it's kind of difficult for either player to have anything too incredibly strong, we still want to raise. And the reason we want to raise with this hand is because we want to build a pot. Notice if we do call and the opponent does have a hand like pocket jacks or queen jack, they're very likely to just check behind on the turn or maybe bet the turn, but then not pay us off if we check raise. But if we check raise immediately on the flop, a lot of people are going to assume we would do this with a lot of draws, which, to be fair, we would do this with a lot of draws. If I had a draw like 6-5 for a gut shot, or 6-4 for a gut shot, or even 5-4 for an open-ended straight draw, or 8-7 of spades for a bad flush draw, I'm going to be check raising all of those, as well as my few premium hands. And I will call pre-flop with queen 3 suited, queen 2 suited, 3-2 suited I probably call as well, pocket threes and pocket twos. So we do have some very, very strong hands that has even our opponent's pocket aces in bad shape. So by check raising in this scenario with a very polarized range of our best made hands and our draws that have some equity, we put our opponent in a situation where their entire range becomes bluff catchers. Because if I announce I'm only raising with hands better than pocket aces, then pocket aces becomes a bluff catcher, right? So we're going to check raise. And if we were much shallower stack, like say we only had 4,000 chips in our stack, you won't need to raise to build the size of the pot. But when you're very deep stacked, notice we're playing about 100 big blinds deep against our opponent, you need to check raise. So we do check raise to 2,000 over our opponent's 600 bet. They call. And now we're just off to the races. We're going to be blasting the turn and blasting the river. The goal is to try to get our opponent all in or close to all in on the river. I realize that the pot's 5,850 and our opponent has 27,000 behind, so it's going to be kind of hard to stack him. I suppose if I do bet 6,000 on the turn for about the size of the pot and our opponent calls, the pot will be 18 and our opponent will have 21 left. But I would venture to say that in tournaments like the World Series of Poker Main Event, people really don't want to go broke. So if they really don't want to go broke, and I'm trying to value bet here, I think the exploitative play is to probably make us a bet that does not put our opponent all in by the river. And I understand you want to play big pots with your nut hands, but I do think in tournaments that people really care about, they're not going to make kind of big hero calls, especially when they obviously do lose to your nut hands. So I think a bet of more like 4,000 or 4,500 is probably ideal, understanding I'm not going to be able to put my opponent all in on the river. I do go 5,400 in this case, though, so maybe I didn't care about that. You know, if you can just look and tell your opponent has pocket aces and you know they're not going to fold because perhaps you've been aggressive, you've been battling, maybe the idea of our opponent doesn't want to go broke goes out the window. But the fact that I have this player tagged as a tight player makes me think that if I was playing this hand today, I want to make more reasonable bets that will not make my opponent all of a sudden become very suspicious that they could be beat to the point that they would make a big fold. So I think at 5,400, the opponent calls, which is great. I'm just going to be betting every river. Even if a spade comes, I'm still just going to bet. I will say if a spade comes, I'll bet smaller than if a non-spade comes. Like say the river is a 7 or a 8 or a 9 or something like that, just a pretty blank card, I would definitely go on the big side. But if it is a spade, I'm going to be betting smaller, like 5,000 or 6,000, because then if the opponent does have pocket aces and a spade comes, they lose to all the made hands and most of the draws, so now they should actually make hero folds if I bet big. Anyway, we get an interesting river, the king. The opponent could definitely have pocket kings, right? Which is kind of annoying, but understand they could still have pocket aces. There's 6 combinations of those. They could have 3 kings and 3 queens. There's, 6 of those, but they could also be sitting here with a hand like ace, king of spades, or maybe even just like a weird hero called ace, king that decided to bluff catch that's going to pay off every time. They could also have ace, queen that would be likely to pay off, or king, queen that would be likely to pay off. So there's a decent number of hands that could still pay off, not even counting various hero calls like pocket jacks, and they decide to just make an insane call against me. So pot's 16,600. Our opponent has 22,000 left. Again, I don't think we can get it all in here. I would not like an all-in unless my opponent just thinks I'm insane. Now, sometimes when I'm playing poker, at the live poker table, my opponents will get the vibe that I'm insane. If they think that I'm just going to be blasting it here like a lunatic, maybe I should go all in for a little bit more than the size of the pot. But I do think even the reasonable players will start folding out pocket aces in this scenario because now they lose to even like random king queen that was overvaluing and whatnot, right? So I think a bet of something like 13,000 is pretty nice. If I do bet 13,000 and get jammed on, ooh, it's nasty. That's where you really have to figure out if your opponent is capable of ever like overvaluing a hand worse than a set. Because if your opponent does have a hand like king queen and jams it all in ever, it's just a disaster, right? So that would be quite bad for me. Or if they have ace king, like ace king spades, they decide to jam it in because they think, oh, well, ace king's pretty good. Who knows what the opponents are going to do. So you definitely don't want to be in that scenario. But this is certainly a spot where I do think we need to value bet, and I think we want to go on the bigger side. I do go all in, and I don't like the all in unless I know very, very certainly that my opponent thinks I am bluffing a lot. Maybe I can tell that my opponent is trying to get a read on me, and maybe I've given off some subtle tell of weakness as a reverse tell or something. So, look, I understand why I would make this bet. I would love to make this bet with hands like 5-4 or 6-5 or 6-4 or, hands like 9-8 of spades. I would love to make this shove with those hands. So if I would like to make the shove with those hands, I'm trying to be balanced. I think we probably want to jam some nut hands. However, in tournaments like the World Series of Poker Main Event, where, again, people don't want to go broke, I'm not concerned with balance so much. I'm much more concerned with just getting full value out of my hands. So I think a better play here would be to bet 12,000, unless I have some sort of read that my opponent's going to hero call me. And this time the opponent does fold, which is a bummer, right? I think we probably left a solid 12,000 chips on the table, and I messed up. It's interesting, though, because it's kind of hard to know if you actually messed up, because maybe the opponent just had like ace queen and they were always going to fold, or queen jack and they were always going to fold. So it would be great to know if the opponent would call with aces, but I do think whenever you put people at risk in the World Series Poker Main Event, they're going to start folding out hands like even aces in this scenario, and that's pretty bad. If you're trying to get called by aces and you make the aces fold because you bet too big, you messed up. And I would pretty certainly say I messed up here unless I had some sort of insane table dynamic with the opponent such that they think I'm a lunatic. It's always a bummer to leave money on the table. That's going to be it for today. Hope you enjoyed this hand. Don't make the same mistake I did. Good luck in your games. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want more strategy lessons, pre-flop charts, and interactive quizzes, make sure you get your free membership to pokercoaching.com right now at pokercoaching.com/free. I'll talk to you next time.